Intergenerational trauma is a trauma that is carried from generation to generation. It is a cycle that is hard to break. One of the major groups affected in Canada are the Indigenous populations. Many who survived are still affected by the traumas of Western attacks on their culture, such as residential schools and the 60s scoop.
At its essence, the children died through neglect. Children died because they were not well cared for, they were not well nourished, they were not provided with proper health supports and medical care. Most of the children died from diseases that were preventable and treatable. Many of them were sent home, in fact, to die because
the children put into these schools faced physical, mental, and sexual abuse while being forced into doing manual labor. They had no contact with their families or culture. If they did return home, they were scarred and could no longer communicate with their own parents or tribe. As a result, many Indigenous communities never felt what it was like to be part of a family or to parent. This led the door wide open for the 60s scoop. When word had spread about the abuse that took place in the residential schools, the government had to find a new way to take the Indian out of the child. The children were forced into social welfare systems, becoming wards of the Crown. They were often placed in Christian homes, taken away from their culture and identity. They were often mistreated in these homes.
Prior to the Indian Act of 1951, social services would send abandoned Indigenous children to residential schools. However, the harsh realities of the system were becoming evident, and the practice was no longer acceptable. Hence, the Indian Act of 1951, which gave each individual province the control to enforce child welfare as said province saw fit. In just one decade, the percentage of Indigenous children in provincial care went from 1% to 34% from the beginning of the 50s to the start of the 60s. This crown of shit upon my life's chair, full of broken thoughts, I cannot repair beneath the stains of time.
1 in 6 Aboriginal people were able to speak an Indigenous language. Suicide rates are twice the national average, yet show no sign of decreasing, and Indigenous people are twice as likely to experience depression. A major concern today are the missing and murdered Indigenous women, often allowed to prevail by the lack of investigation and records kept by police. The NWCA believes that there are more than 4,000 missing and murdered Indigenous women currently. One way Indigenous people are trying to speak out and raise awareness is through things like the Red Dress Project. It also aims to support and encourage the ongoing inquiry on missing and murdered Indigenous women.
We have a lot of elders today who have a memory, and when I mean memory, not in their head, I mean physically, instinctively, a memory of trauma, but can't identify it, can't recognize it, can't say what it is.
For anyone who's gone through childhood sexual abuse like that, when somebody comes into your room at night, you know what victory is like, and you know what success is right there, because you've made it through the night without being molested.